Hi there, colleagues. Good to see you remotely, kindergarten teachers. It has been a while. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Megan Hargrave. I think it's probably been 3 years now that maybe it's been since I've worked with Nimitz teachers. And I'm excited to do some work with you guys today, albeit asynchronously. I actually, just a little tidbit, I moved back to the Midwest and work on my own now. I don't work with the Reading and Writing Project, but I'm still much so deeply invested in that work. But what that has afforded me to do, or allowed me to do, is work with schools in lots of different ways. And one of those roles that I've taken on this year is little snippets of work with different schools across your district. And so on Wednesdays, I laugh, it's my Cupertino Wednesdays, I've had the chance to work with lots of different CUSD teachers and just help you all with the reading units of study, the writing units of study, the phonics units of study, but let's be real, also teaching amidst a pandemic. If anybody tells you that they are the expert in any of this, they are not. It hasn't even been a year since we've been in this, although I can't believe it's been just a year. And so with that, I will do my best to bring to you some knowledge that I've gained from lots of different schools that I've worked in, some knowledge I've gained from my own work with kindergarten students and with students across grade levels, and hopefully we'll just give you some things to think about as you embark on this final part of the year, which seems like it might be the craziest yet. And then in addition to that, hopefully giving us some things that will help you well beyond that. Since this is a recording, the perk is that you can pause along the way to chat, to process, take in little snippets. I'm going to break it down into like 4 major sections. I also, since it's recorded, this is something that you could go back to again and again with your colleagues. I am going to attach in the agenda materials that I'm going to refer to today, but then also, since I'll be taking some notes and doing some chicken scratch with you all, I will go ahead and make sure that that is added in that agenda as well. So anyhow, without further ado, when Celestina and I talked and she reached out to all of you, she gave me topics that you were interested in studying. And this particular group talked about wanting to think about how to support our kindergarten writers, how to best help our struggling writers, but how to also just best help writing amidst a kindergarten year, especially a kindergarten year when students are remote and not with us, or maybe some will be with us and some won't. So with that, I'm just going to go ahead and share out kind of the major parts that I had planned based on the information that I had, and I'm hoping you'll all walk away with some really practical things that help you launch into the end of the year. We're going to start with just some general structures that have been working in a lot of places that might give some good reminders, but also just some good food for thought as you move into the end of the year. From there, we're going to think about some specifically thinking about small group and some ideas for your small group structures. From there, definitely the meat of our time together will be some predictable small groups, and I want you to walk away with some very clear small groups that you can be doing with your students at this time in the year. And then last but not least, we are going to spend a little bit of time talking about shared writing as a structure to support students. So with that, you'll see 4 different little snippets along the way, and we'll go from there. So I'm going to go back and forth as we do this between sharing and not sharing, just as a way to kind of keep us all together. But why don't we get started, and let's just dip into talking about some structures for writing. And I'm sure I'm going to share things that are just reminders of what you're already doing. I'm sure you could add to this list. But I was just trying to think, okay, for Nimitz teachers at this point in the year, knowing that our structures of where kids are at physically is ever evolving, what would be some tips to just start our conversation when it comes to structures for writing, specifically in the 2020-2021 school year? So some of the different things for kinder teachers that have been specifically for kindergarten teachers that have been helpful are the following. The first one is thinking about even when students are independently working and independently writing, I think what was happening a lot, or what is happening, is they might come together for a lesson and then we send them off to go do their writing on their own. Or we're tempted to keep them all together and just kind of chat over them and do lots of guided practice. And we want to, as best we can, albeit a crazy year, but we want to uphold the structures of trying to look at our block of time and having, yes, some time for direct instruction, but also a big chunk of time for independent practice, albeit 10 minutes, 12 minutes, 15 minutes. This should be the bulk of the time. And this should be the direct instruction before they practice the bulk of the time or the mini lesson. And so with that said, again, easier said than done. But one thing that has been tremendously helpful is to think about keeping kids online um, during practice. And what I mean by that is they don't have to be talking to you. They don't have to be like looking at the screen. I want to actually minimize screen time, but to keep their screen up, and you can watch them literally as their head is down and as they're writing, but to keep them online has been really helpful. Other Cupertino kindergarten teachers have dabbled in breakout rooms and keeping kids in breakout rooms, or even one kinder teacher was brave and took the step of opening up an individual breakout for all of her students. So if you have 25 students, you open up 25 breakouts. And when they independently work or they independently write, they're in that breakout. So you can pop around and do conferences and support them and whatnot. But keeping them online just so that you can monitor their volume and their stamina has been really helpful. You can tell when you've got like students with feet in the air, rolling around or off getting their snack. And I'm not saying they get in trouble for that, but you could name it out and then teach into that. Just like in your classroom, if kids were lacking stamina or volume, you would be able to see that and note that. And so that's why keeping them online has been helpful. Of course, some ideas when you are keeping them online is to think about how to make their writing visible, not just to you, but also to each other. One of the things that's missing this year are table groups. And if you think about how much learning happens in table groups during a normal year, it's significant. And that's without the teacher. They do a lot of lurking, they do a lot of looking. And so how can we help them make their writing visible to each other? Some of the things that have been working in some schools is just having students tilt their screen. So you can't see everything, but when they tilt their screen or even lean their iPad, they've learned how to do that, then you can see them writing. I was working with a group of first graders the other day, and it was just, you couldn't see everything, but it was nice to see them. Of course, teaching them to do a screenshot and putting it onto Seesaw has been incredibly helpful. I'm sure you guys have already figured that out. Or taking a screenshot and putting it onto a Jamboard and sharing it with each other. Even remembering to take time to do the old-fashioned hold up in the screen periodically throughout workshop, not just at the end. Hey, kinders, let's take a break. Let's do a hold up. Everybody hold up your writing. Okay, let's hold it up for 30 seconds and let's all look at each other's peek around. What do you see? Do you see something you want to try? Do you see something you could use? Do you see something that's like your writing? So doing the hold up and the peek throughout writing workshop will help recreate some of those structures that we used to have of table groups. One of the things that you can do if students come back in person, and if there's students in person and at home, is to even think about how you can build community across the students at home and the students in school. So they can have a partnership or a club or a group across both of those groups. Couple other things that have been working just in general for the structures. Some of the things that teachers have been doing to give feedback or to confer during this independent time has been using voice notes. I don't know if you guys have figured this out, but to just leave a little voice note, either in the student Seesaw page, you can do it on Padlet. Google actually has an extension called Read Write Voice Notes. And so if you do voice notes, instead of doing written feedback that they probably won't be able to read anyway, can you record yourself? And when you record yourself, remembering to not say everything, but give one compliment. Good job, I noticed you're already doing this. And one teach or one next step. So when we are doing voice notes and we're upholding that structure of conferring, to think about that. Another structure that's just been helpful, I guess this would be more towards the mini lesson during a turn and talk, or as we look at students writing, or to get them more actively involved, has just been answering, do you think a 1, 2, or 3 in the chat, especially for kinders. So whatever question you pose, give an option 1, 2, or 3, so they're not writing whole answers, but they're saying, I think number 1, or I think number 2, or I think you should write lead number 3, and then putting that in the chat. I guess last two more things. I was going to say last but not least, but I have two more on my list just when we think about overall structures. The first one is to just remember at this point in the year, if students were in person and if it was a normal year, one of the things we would be working towards is increasing volume and increasing independence. And just because we're online does not mean we should let go of these two goals towards the end of the year. It's easier said than done, especially when they have parents at home who are doing the octopus arms and doing a lot of the work for them. But to just say, you know, writers, we are going to really work at this point in the year to think how we can be more independent or how we can get more volume is a nice just class goal to have. And then last but not least, another thing you might dabble in that gets us back to the normal structures of writing is to remember the importance of writing partnerships. And I actually already kind of dabbled in this when I talked about making writing visible. It's really important for students to see each other's writing, and for kindergartners to see the brokenness of a partner's writing, or the partner who's leaving spaces between the words when she or he is not right here, or a partnership who gets an idea of a story idea based on what they're seeing a partner doing, or even just the vocabulary and the language practice by talking to somebody else. I know that this year it's been very easy to say, you know what, this is not the leg I'm going to stand on. This is not going to be the basket I'm going to put my eggs in. But maybe as you move towards the end of the year, you could keep this really light, really brief, but start to increase opportunities for students to work together in partnerships. One really simple way is to give your partner feedback on Seesaw. And you don't have to call it that, as that sounds fancy, but look at your partner's writing on Seesaw and tell them one thing that they did well, or compliment them on one thing, or just read it and look at it. Is at its simplest level. Another thing that writing partners can do, another very simple idea, is to just share ideas. It doesn't have to even be writing, but to just share and talk through ideas with each other. So at any rate, these are some different things, kind of a hodgepodge of things, but some things I was thinking about specifically for you as Nimitz teachers when we think about structures for writing in kindergarten during the craziness of this pandemic year, as we enter what I like to call the last quarter of the year, though maybe we would say a third, but let's go with quarter, it sounds better. So just some things to keep in mind. Feel free to pause right now. Feel free to process that. It was kind of a Megan dump of some important things that have been helping me. From there, we're going to move more into small groups, but just take a second, look across that, think about what you might add. If you're watching this with colleagues, what are some structures that you've been leaning on that have been working? Okay. So let's move on to the next bit. Again, please feel free to pause, feel free to process, etc. Let's move on to the next one. And the next thing I wanted us to specifically talk through before we get into predictable small groups, which is what you guys asked for, and we're going to get there, I promise, is to just think more about small group structures. So we just talked about overall structures for writing, and we just talked about, you know, reminding ourselves of like, what does workshop look like? And although it's not perfect this year, how can we do some more of that? I know that one time that small groups happen when we're in person is during this. That may or may not be happening right now just because of logistics. But I also know that across the district, one of the goals has been to pull together students in small groups periodically across the week so that they're all getting some of that small group instruction. And really why we want the small group instruction is not just because it's a district mandate, but we know one of the most important things for kinders, but especially for anybody, but especially for kinders, is that we have a range of learners, and we really need to differentiate the instruction to make them successful inside of this piece. I think next year we're going to find that there is such a range of learners based on experiences that they've had during the pandemic. You think about preschool and what that's looked like or hasn't looked like for certain schools or certain families, and that will certainly have some implications here. So small groups is a really important teaching tool that we have to support our range of learners. And as much as small groups can make us feel kind of crazy, it is a way to make us feel less crazy in the major needs that we have across our classrooms. So with that said, I'm just going to give, I'm going to give 5 tips, a handful of tips that can help you with your small group structures. And then we're going to move into some predictable small groups. Number 1, and this is especially for this year. Okay, I'm thinking like small group structures during a pandemic, during this year that we will never forget. So number 1 is to teach across days. You're like, yes, Megan, I know that. Let me explain. So if I'm looking at 2 weeks of instruction and I have a small group that meets on Tuesdays and Thursdays, I am not going to teach something new on this day and this day. I'm going to teach the same thing and have them practice the same thing across both days. And I might even go so far as to say practice the same thing across 4 days. So it's not every single time they come to a small group, it's something different, but to pick something high leverage that they need repeated practice on across days. I find that what happens is otherwise they come and it's one thing and there's no follow through or carry through. I think this also reminds us that small groups are not meant to be to just have kids master the mini lesson. That's not the intention. The intention is that a small group is for you to come together and me to give you what you need. Our mini lessons are important, yes, but our small group is an opportunity to differentiate and give kids access to what they need. So thinking about teaching across days and planning a chunk for small groups instead of individual small groups. So have like a theme of the 2 weeks, and you can even say it to the kids. We're going to be really focused on this for these 4 sessions or these 3 sessions. That said, if we're taking one thing and going across days, we really want to think about picking high leverage teaching. And I'm going to give ideas for this in a second. But when I say this, I want you to just ask yourselves, is this a small group that I'm teaching that they're going to master right away? Or is this a skill I'm teaching that's going to be easy for them? Is this something that I'm teaching that like they're ish doing, but not fully doing? That's probably not the most high leverage move. So when we think high leverage, think the thing that's going to be most important to their writing, not just in this one page or this one piece, but across all of their writing. So an example might be, I can teach you how to write a good question to start your how-to piece, but is that as important as me teaching you to put spaces between your words? Probably not. Or I could teach you 3 words that you can use as transitions for your how-to books, step 1, step 2, step 3. But is that as important as me teaching you how to add labels to your work if that's something you're not yet doing? I'm not saying that the transitions is a bad thing, and that could be the high leverage move. But just ask yourself, for this group of learners, is this something that's going to last them for days? Is this something that's going to last them across pieces? 3 more things. I said 5. Places to start. If we're talking high leverage, I want you to think about 2 places to start. And we're going to talk about these in shortly as well. Start with volume. If they're not writing a lot, if they're not producing a lot, they're not going to get to practice a lot. So that should be one of your number 1 places to go. If they have 1 word on the page for a whole day, you've got to think about ways to increase volume. I'm going to give us some thoughts in a second, but volume, stamina, overall productivity is something really important. And then also starting with phonics. So instead of teaching something specific to the genre or the unit, I would rather teach you something that's going to be really important to the phonics skills that I'm teaching. So those are 2 places to start. And then 2 more things. The fourth thing would be to, as best you can inside of your small groups, don't bring something new, don't bring something different, but try to plan using the tools and charts that they have already seen, that are already familiar, that they already have access with inside of your small group. It will reiterate the importance of them using those, what I call silent teachers. So an example would be the alphabet chart. Or I'm not saying make the small group about how to use it, but during your small group, use that as a tool, or use their individual word wall. Again, not how to use it, but during your small group, if you can pull that out, do it. Same thing with the vowel chart and the vowel sounds chart, as best you can. And then I could say the unit of study chart, of course, but all I'm trying to point out is that during your small group, if you can model the use of those tools and have them pull out those tools that they already have access to, the more likely they will be to use those tools independently. And I think for kindergarten, this is one of the most important things that we could teach. We could be really quick to say they're in kindergarten, they're not going to remember to use it, but let's take that as our starting point and let's say to ourselves, how can we support them in getting them to use these materials? And then last but not least, when it comes to just overall small group structures or tips, I guess is what I'm giving in 2020-21, is to remember that it is really, really important, especially this year, this is easier said than done, is to keep participation, and I'm going to put participation / talk high. That should be one of our biggest goals inside of a small group. I know for myself, even I've been teaching small groups and I'll get to 10 minutes and I'm like, I've only heard my voice. I haven't heard anybody talk. I haven't heard anybody share anything. And small groups is such a great opportunity, especially where language is an issue or level is an issue, or even home life is an issue, and students aren't getting as much talk that we would want them to have there. The small group is a great entry point for them. So just say to yourself during these small groups, it is always best to have less of you and more of them. Easier said than done, but think about the balance, even if this means you have to teach less to get them to participate more, okay? Part number 2, done. So we talked about structures for writing in general and some general tips. We talked about small group structures and what that looks like during the craziness of the year. And we're going to move into 2 more final pieces. The next one is specifically going to be around small groups. So I just shared some structures, but then the meat of what this team asked for was for me to actually share some predictable small groups. So we're going to go there next, and I'm going to even show you some resources that I think will be helpful to you. And I'm just going to name out some of the major things that you could be teaching at this point in the year, and then we'll end with some shared writing, okay? So you can hit pause now if you want to. This would be a good time to like grab a drink of water. Even if you need to pause now and come back, now's a good time to stop. Talk with your colleagues about that. And we're going to move into this guy. And when I was planning for today, I was trying to think like, okay, I can give you, and I am going to, here are some predictable small groups. But then I also thought, could I give you or remind you of some places you can go, some tools that you have that can help you to plan forward as well, so that you're not having to like, wait, where's that Megan person again? And what are some other ideas I can add? But let's jump in. I'm going to give 4 predictable small groups, or things you could be teaching in small groups. And then I'm going to give 2 resources that if I were you, I would be looking at a lot. Okay. So I already mentioned that 2 of the areas you want to focus on are volume and stamina and phonics, especially at this point in the year for kindergarten students. And so with each of these small groups, I think what you're going to find, especially for the first 4, is that these are going to be small groups that are going to support volume and stamina. And then we'll move into one of them, actually, the fourth one will lead into some phonics work, and then I'll point you towards some phonics resources as well, okay? So when it comes to increasing volume, stamina, productivity, student writing, getting them to write more. I mean, they're in kindergarten and we're trying to teach them how to write remotely when they've probably never even written much before, depending on what their past experiences have been. Here are some predictable things we could teach. Number one, we do this in the beginning of units. We do it especially at the beginning of the year, but I don't think we can do it enough. And it's to teach students to literally plan across pages. And I know they're at home, so they might not have booklets to write in, or they're writing, what they're physically writing on might look different, but teaching them things like folding a page and making a little booklet for themselves, and then teaching across the booklet, or even teaching in the 4 parts, step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. So teaching them physically how to plan. So first I think of an idea, then I plan, then I sketch, then I write. So go back to that. I mean, it's one of the first lessons in the first unit in kindergarten is think, plan, write, or think, plan, draw. Think, plan, sketch. So go back to that over and over again. And I know you might be thinking, but I already did that. If they're not doing it, if they're not writing with volume and stamina, it would be a great thing to do in a small group. And the key to this is when you do teach them to plan across pages, it's important to teach them over and over again, meaning you don't just plan once, especially for kinders, like think, plan, write. I don't just say step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. Great, I'm ready to write. You say, tell me again, tell me again, tell me again, tell me again. And the point is not to get them to parrot back the exact same thing every time, but each time they say it, they're solidifying it more in their mind. And if they do change it a little bit, it's a good thing. It means they're revising as they go. So have whole small group days where it's just planning. Say it again, say it to a partner. Ooh, we want to hear Megan share again. Great. Oh, we want to hear Joelle share again. Great. Keep going. Okay. We want to hear, Sean sharing again. Go for it. So they just keep saying over and over again their plan and sharing with each other. That leads to the second piece that I would say is a really predictable small group. And again, you might be thinking, but these aren't small groups, this is structures. I would say make them small groups because they're things that will help them across any genre. A second small group is to teach kids the skill of writing in the air. And the skill of, it's oral rehearsal is what you would call it, but to say, writers, I've got a secret. Today I want to teach you that we don't just write words on the page, we write words in the air. And when we talk, we're writing words in the air. And we can practice our writing by writing those words in the air. So writers, we're working on how-tos right now. And instead of opening up your booklet and your pages, I want to teach you that you can write in the air by thinking, what am I going to say? Planning, what am I going to say? And then writing, this is what I'm going to say. Step 1, blah, 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 blah. Step 2, blah, 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 blah. Step 3, blah, 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 blah. And so teaching them the skill of writing in the air, you can even teach them after they write in the air, they can think about planning even the words that they're going to say. Let me be more specific. So I was doing a small group with kids the other day, and she said, they were doing all about books. She said something, elephants are very big. And that's what she said to me. Elephants she said, so elephants are so big. And I said to her, I was like, okay, elephants are so big. And I said to her, count out the number of words. Elephants are so big. They said, okay, now you know how many words you need to put on the page. Okay, open your booklet. And maybe underneath it, you're going to write 4 dots. Elephants are so big. Elephants are so big. Okay, as best you can, go ahead and put elephants are so big. So Katrina then said to herself, elephants are so big. She didn't know how to write all these words. She did her best. There was a little E, I think an F, an S right here, a physical, like the letter R right here. She had the word so, and she had the word big, but she knew how many words she had to include based on her writing on the air and based on her planning. So that's a really great small group. A fourth small group that you might, and again, we've done this throughout the year, but you can't reiterate it enough, is to teach students to move from pictures to labels to words, and then after all of that, to more labels and to more words. So I know that a lot of times as kinders, we were like, okay, get the picture on the page, sketch your picture. And we might even teach them to like label one thing, label a couple things, but to teach them the skill of then taking those labels and putting them words on the page or sentences is really important. And then after they do that, one way to say more or to elaborate, to increase your volume and stamina is go back, add more labels. And they're like, well, there's nothing else I could add. I wrote girl and I wrote ball. I'm like, well, what else? Okay, what else? You could draw, you could add more in your drawing. They want to do that. But I say, is there anything else on the girl? And I point to something, they say hand, or they say leg, or shirt, or shoe, or head. And so adding all those things, sure, then in their writing, it's not going to be ideal. The girl had a head, the girl had a hand, but at least it's just getting them to see that they can elaborate by moving fluidly between these three things. I think sometimes in kindergarten, we myself included, and the units compartmentalize these things. First we draw pictures, then we add labels, then we write words. But teaching students to move fluidly back and forth between these things is really important. And then last but not least, and then I'm going to give a couple of resources, is to remind students the use of silent teachers. And I think this is an incredible small group. I did this with a group of kinders the other day. Here's how it went. I just said, kindergartners, I brought a teacher with me. Actually, it's a picture of a teacher. And I'm going to show it to you in a second. And I'm wondering if you've ever seen this teacher before. I wonder, is it going to be Miss Carbone? Is it going to be Miss Hargrave? Is it going to be Miss Vasquez? I'm going to show you a picture of a teacher. Are you ready? Are you picturing? Who do you think it's going to be? Which teacher do you think it's going to be? Maybe it's going to be your pre-K teacher. I don't know. You ready to see it? Okay, here we go. 1 second. I'm going to get ready. Oh, let me make sure it's pulled up before I get my screen out there. I hope you guys are thinking. Are you thinking? What teacher? What picture? Whose teacher is it going to be? Is it going to be me? Is it going to be somebody else? That's it. That's the picture of the teacher. Kindergartners, is this anybody's teacher? And they all say, no, it's not our teacher. And I say, it doesn't look like a teacher. It doesn't look like a person. Where's her head? Where's her shirt? Who is this? And then I look closely and I say, writers, but here's the secret. Today, I want to teach you that this is a teacher. This is a silent teacher. This is one of those things that we have that teaches us when we most need it. I want you to think, what could this teacher teach us? Like, when could this teacher help us? Take a second. What could this teacher help us do? And then the one kid said, the ABCs. Somebody else yelled out apple. Somebody else said A. Somebody else said make an A. So then they gave me all the times. And then I was more specific. I said, when could we use it in reading? When could we use it in writing? And then we talked more about how this teacher could help us. We went through and we did it with a few others. We did it with the vowel chart. We did it with this one. It was awesome. It was like, how could this teacher help us? Oh my gosh, this is a lot. How could this teacher help us in reading? Or first of all, like, what is this teacher? And then how could this teacher help us in reading? How could this teacher help us in writing? So at any rate, I do think a really important small group at this point in the year is to teach kids how to rely more regularly on the silent teachers that they have and the resources that we've given that will support independence. Okay? So these would be like my four, like, if you think about, the end of the year is actually nearing. I know it does not seem that way, but like if you could have your kinders walk away with 4 major skills to help them as writers, these 4 things are going to give them a leg up regardless of the genre, regardless of the unit, regardless of the year. There's 2 places that I want to remind you that you can go to get resources and materials that can help. The first one, with predictable small groups. The first one is, don't forget that those unit of study videos, although some of them are awkward and weird and lame, they are an amazing resource, especially for small groups. Like some of those phonics small groups that Natalie's teaching for the kindergartners are amazing. Go back to some of the videos from earlier in the year and have groups of students watch them. Take that off your plate. I know it's not the same as you. I know it's not you delivering it, but it's not going to hurt them. So using those unit of study videos while we have them is a great resource. Hey, readers, writers, I brought a teacher with me today. And she's gonna reteach something that we learned back in the first unit. And I thought, I found this video of her teaching and I thought this could really help us. And so let's watch it together. So use those videos, give yourself permission to use those videos, not that you need it from me. And then the second thing I wanna remind you is that the phonics small group book is worth its weight in gold. You might be thinking to me right now, Megan, I don't know what that is. I think I actually referred to it. I remember with Nimitz talking about it, gosh, back with Carrie. I think I left it behind and said, look at this book, it's gold, and it truly is gold. I linked it. If you're like, what is it? I don't know what it is. I linked the full book, don't sell it, onto the shared doc that I shared with you all, or I linked it right onto the agenda so that you can refer back to it. But let me just show you right now how I would see this book helping you as you move towards the end of the year. What's really nice about this book is that it is broken down. Oops, you don't need to see that. That's not what I meant to have pulled up. Just give me 1 second. There we go. What's really nice about this book is that each session is broken down where it tells you when it's best taught. So who to teach, like when would this be helpful? And then is it a reading or a writing small group? And if you go to the top, we're gonna come back to this one shortly, but we're gonna go to the top first. Sorry, I'll give you a headache scrolling. We're going to go to the top here, and I'm just going to show you what's really nice about this book is it breaks down, not the acknowledgements, that's lovely too, but it breaks down all of these really important phonics skills, but also reading and writing skills. And so you could just plan some of your small groups off of this. There's actually some good recordings of them on Heinemann, and most of the small groups have a little chart that goes with them or a tool, or quite frankly, they use the same tools that students were using or that they already are using during phonics reading and writing, which is nice. You'll see some carry through. If you go down here at the end, what's also nice is it has a whole part for strategies for writing words correctly, and it has a whole part for reading words correctly. Not to mention a whole part on snap words. There's so many good things in here. So now I'm going to scroll down and just show you one. I was thinking specifically as we were talking, let's go down. I'm sorry, giving you a headache here. So strategies for, oops, I went too far. I wanted to go to strategies for writing words correctly and just show you one of the examples. Sorry guys, stick with me. Oh, hang on. Going to 55. It's me trying to be savvy online. There we go. This is the one I was looking for. Strategies for writing words correctly. And I just wanted to give you an example. So like here's one where students are making an editing checklist, and actually it has a really good, you go on Heinemann, you can print out that editing checklist, which is cool. But then also I really liked this one. I liked the writing words longer part by part. And I feel like for kinder at this point in the year, this could be a really helpful thing. And what's nice is it tells you like, who would this be for? When would this be taught? And then it gives you a little tool that you could use with them. So this is perfect material for small groups. I know it seems like a lot and you're like, how do I even go to it? But what's nice is that all of the sessions not in true TC fashion, are 1 or 2 pages at most. So they're quick and they're easy. And even if you just come to it and you read the bold words and you look at the chart, you'll get the idea of what this small group could be. Okay, so that would be my suggestion for a resource. It is worth its weight in gold. It's amazing. And if I were to think about how you could really lean into teaching phonics skills here at the end of the year, using that resource is going to be, oops, this is what I'm looking for, teaching phonics skills as a priority. Using that resource is really going to help. Okay, so there are your predictable small groups. Those are some things that we can think about inside of small groups. I'm going to share one more little tidbit for you that I think will be helpful in the spirit of small groups, but also whole group, and then we'll end. So just a couple more minutes with me, guys. So one thing I've been doing the heck out of, whole class and small group, has been shared writing. And I know that you might be thinking like, gosh, when am I supposed to have time to do that? And this is a crazy year and I don't have time to do that. You probably don't, which is why embed it inside of your small groups is one avenue that you could take, and to do some of that shared writing inside of the small groups. And I'm going to actually show you just some really simple ways that I have been doing that with different writers that's actually been working really well. One of the reasons why shared writing is such an important structure is because shared writing is a structure that we can be using. Sorry, I didn't realize my screen was being shared. Shared writing is a structure that we can be using to help students see what writing looks like, and really thinking about how writing can get created. So it's a way to kind of give them a vision for what the physical act of writing looks like, but also the composition of writing looks like. So when we think about shared writing, it's writing that is composed together. So it's writing that the teacher is usually doing the physical writing, but the students are composing it together. And it's really important to keep participation high. Participation high during this. So lots of turn and talk, lots of share it out, lots of say what your line would be. I was with some kinders the other day and I said, write down what you would put the next word as, write down what you would say, write down the sketch you would put, hold it up. And I can't take all of their answers and put it into the writing, but they're all getting a lot of practice. So even if their answer isn't the one that goes in, I still say, think what you would put next. What would be your sentence? What would be your start? So you're keeping the participation really high. It's a great chance to practice that writing in the air, or as we would call it, oral rehearsal. I think it's a really important time for students to do lots of that talk. When you are doing shared writing, there's different things that you could focus on, and I'm going to show you that in a second. Like you could pick a focus, and the focus could be specifically for the unit or genre. Let's write a how-to together. The focus could be phonics skills that you're working on. The focus could be sight words that you're working on. I'm going to share an example of that in a second. But having a focus for the shared writing so that it's not just a catch-all will help it to be more powerful. And then last but not least, it's really important that after you do the shared writing, you take the writing and then you practice it in reading. Let's read it together. Let's read these words together. Let's say how it goes. And it can actually become a book that they then use for shared reading, or a warm-up text, or a part of their book bin that they can read. So it's a book that they can then go back to, or some writing they can go back to, because the key is that it's not us just doing this activity. The key is that there's some sort of transference back into your own writing. So if we did this together today, what's the point and how could you replicate this on your own? Okay. This could be whole group work or club work. I'm going to just share an example of what I mean, just to give you guys a vision. So I've been doing a lot of this on Jamboard. It's been a great place to go for small groups. And this is one I did the other week, and the students and I were focusing on sight words. And so I asked the teacher, what are some of their sight word friends that they've been using? And we put them here on the side and we practiced them. And then I said, writers, help me. I need to write words on this page. So what words should we use? So I look at my sight words, the, look, at, we, I, see. Let me just start with them. At, we, I don't think that works. See, what if I do what could come next? We? No, that doesn't sound right. I see. Let's all say it together. Okay, and I want you, kindergartners, I want you to write down right now on your whiteboard or a piece of paper what the next word should be. I see and steal. Which one of these 5 words, which one of these friends could we use? Write it down and hold it up. And then they all hold up, hopefully, what is I see, I see, I see, and what should the last word be? Give it a go on your whiteboard. I'm going to actually put a different color post-it. I see, I'm going to put a different color post-it because I don't think we're going to use one of our yellow words. Let's use another word. Do your best. I see, oh my goodness, I see a lion. Or maybe somebody wrote scary lion, or I see it. You guys get the idea. Here are some examples of what we then did together. I see a snake. Some kids did look at the snake. We see a monkey, look at the, and then we practice putting monkey at the end. So there's a lot of different ways you could use this. This was another one that we had used. Oops. We were actually the other day also doing it where we were looking at old friends and new friends. And I'll zoom out here so you can see this. And students were actually looking then at a character that they know well and using the sight words they had to create, do some shared writing of what words would go on this page. So there's all sorts of things you could do. You could do it with a how-to, you could do it with sight words, you could do it with, you know, just thinking about making a plan for what would go on this page. So shared writing is a really great structure to just build their overall writing process muscles. So that's that. We talked about writing workshop structures, predictable small group structures. We talked about predictable small groups and then shared writing. Teachers, I think last but not least, to just remind ourselves that as we get overwhelmed in the content that we have to teach kids, first of all, be happy that we're kindergarten teachers. They've got a lot of years to come, a lot of years ahead of them, but also remind ourselves that it's not necessarily the units that are the most important. It's not necessarily the product that's the most important. It's not necessarily the read aloud book we're reading that's the most important. What's most important is that we are giving students time to practice, that we are giving students, and I should say time to practice with increasing independence and with increasing volume and stamina. The more you practice, the more you're going to learn. It's true of any basic skill, so that we're being better at biting our tongue and encouraging them to do the heavy lifting. We know that they're going to learn something if there's some explicit instruction, and that explicit instruction can be whole group, it can be small group, it can be one-on-one. So when we get overwhelmed and we think, oh, there's so much to do, just say to yourself, am I giving them time? Am I teaching them a little something? And I would say you're well on your way. And then there's 2 more things we could add. You're going to continue to be well on your way if we give them some access to materials, those tools. And don't just give them to them, get them to use them. Give them those tools, give them those silent teachers and say, use them, pull them out. Will all of them use them? Heck no. But if some of them use them, it's a step in the right direction. And then last but not least, kids are going to learn if they have a chance to write and they have a chance to talk. And it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be the best writing. We're not going for a Pulitzer Prize here right now, but just the idea that kids are getting opportunities to write and talk, and reminding ourselves that writing and talking are 2 different parallel roads to the same end. And that end is thinking, that end is processing, that end is composing. And so I would just encourage you to keep doing all that you're doing and keep those 4 things in mind. Please reach out to me if I can help you guys with anything. I hope this was some good food for thought, some good thinking. I will go ahead and link these charts that I just took to the agenda, so you'll see them as charts that you can look at from our time together. And I think that's it. Thanks, teachers. Happy almost March. Bye.